Hi, welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. I'm Claire Casely, and I have an amazing guest with me today. I feel so honoured and blessed to have him on because, and I'm very thankful to my friend Emma who sent me in Tyler's direction. Um, so Tyler has an amazing story. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about him, and then Tyler, you can say a bit more about yourself. So, over the past 2 decades, Tyler has studied, trained, and practiced a vast number of therapeutic modalities as a body worker and holistic health practitioner. Over the years, Tyler has discovered the heart of listening to the physical body when his clients would discuss life's challenges and found out what looked like molecular blocks within the nervous system as physical manifestations from multi-layered belief systems, trauma, and subconscious memories. It just sounds incredible. So you call yourself a molecular empath.
Well, I
Uh,
didn't. Yes and no. Like
yeah.
I, 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 I didn't coin that term. Actually, my
Oh.
mentor did, and then it just kind of rung with me because I understood where he was coming from, being able to feel on a very deep level. Um, not just people, but the elements around us and what the earth's feeling and what
Mm,
little bugs are feeling and animals and stuff like that. So
yeah.
with my body work, yeah, it became where I could sense at the molecular level, I guess, is because that's how I saw it in my vision when I
Mm,
would work with people
hmm
where blocks were, and I could feel what they were feeling
mm.
from within those little tiny molecules.
Okay, great. So,
That makes sense. I know it's kind
yeah,
of out there, but
no, it makes sense. It does make sense to me. As I was saying before we came on, I'm an empath, so I understand, how you could feel on that sort of level. Um, and yeah, so you're going to talk about an amazing experience you had, your near-death experience with us today. And that happened as a result of a bike accident when you were about 20, is that right? About
yeah,
20
just
years
20 years
old.
old. Hmm.
Yeah. And but that then led gradually, from what I understand, it wasn't overnight, but gradually led you to this new path that you're on now. And yes, I'm really and also there's some fairies involved, which is what I'm all
You're
about.
right.
I'm really excited to hear about it. Um, so yeah, would you like to just give everyone here a bit more of an intro to you and where you are? Because you're in Hawaii, aren't you? So I meant to say that at the beginning, and just a bit more about about you, Tyler. Yeah.
Sure. So, as far as my story is concerned, I've lived many places. Well, going back, I grew up on an orchard. It was a house in an orchard in Northern California, which is the South Bay Area, so San Francisco Bay Area, but not quite that close to the city. It was an orchard, and I just loved running around. We had oak trees, we had plums and pomegranates and peaches and pears, and I felt very connected to the earth there. And so yeah, so it was a connection that was it's not like it's something as a kid you're not trying to make a connection like adults sometimes do. It's pure and it's innocent, and
Mm.
I had that, so I felt very connected to the elements there. And then my family moved when I was 4 years old, and I didn't know that that move was coming, and it kind of shattered something within me. In other words, I felt like I was uprooted and I didn't know what was going on. So that kind of
Mm.
turned that kind of for me that shut off my sensitivity in a way. Not that I
How,
wasn't still an empath, but it shut off my joy, I should say.
yeah. How old were
Yeah,
you? How
I
old
was
were you?
4.
Oh, yeah. It's quite a
Yeah.
critical time in your life, isn't it? That age. Um, and I guess, did you start school shortly after that, or were you about 4 or 5?
Yeah, I believe,
Yeah.
yeah, because I was in school once we had moved to Washington State, which is 2
Mm,
states up from California on the West Coast.
yeah. So you're in this, I mean, I remember that as a child, you're in this lovely sort of playing out in nature, just naturally connecting, um, just able to sort of plug into your imagination, the elements, and then this big change happens. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can relate to
Yeah.
that. I can relate to that from similar experience. And so what happened then? You shut down this
Well,
part of yourself.
I mean, I still played as a kid. Of course, kids are still going to play.
Mm,
But there was like this underlining fear or this underlining disconnect. And the fear came from um, family stuff that was happening in the household that was unpleasant. And and then there was this feeling that came in. It was almost like I didn't deserve that joy that I had back when I was in California. I had to learn how to start growing up at 5, right? So by the time I was a teenager, there was a bit of a rebellion in me, and I didn't do anything to harm anybody. I never believed in that, but it was, there was drugs involved, and I used to go to all the grunge concerts in Seattle because
mm,
that's where I grew up, and kind of got hooked into. I don't want to say the wrong crowds because it was a part of my journey, and I look back at it and I think that was an amazing part of my journey, being exposed to new friends and growing up and stuff. But there wasn't really, it wasn't like when I was 4, Claire, I mean,
mm,
it
mm.
was just kind of a heart. And I'm not the only person that experienced this. There's tons of kids that are
Yeah.
confused about, teenagers, like they have their parents and then they're trying to
Mm.
grow up and there's school and all that
Oh yeah.
conditioning
It's a tough
coming in.
time. It's a tough, it
Yeah.
is, it's a real sort of, I mean, I look at my teenage years. I mean, it is a time of initiation. And if you've got home stuff going on as well, I mean, that is, yeah, it's really tough. So, yeah, I hear you. Mm,
Yeah. So my parents they split up. They separated. They didn't get a divorce. They separated in 1988, and I went and lived with my mom in a different city or different part of um, Washington. And there was a part of me that started to feel that freedom again. It was like, oh, I can do what I want. I was a latchkey kid. I don't know if you know that term in England.
yeah, yeah, I do. I
Uh,
used to be a teacher.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
um, gosh, about 20 years ago now, and there are a few kids that I was aware of that were in that situation. So, yeah,
Yeah,
know that
so my
term.
mom, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, carry on. No,
Okay.
it's fine.
So yeah,
Mm,
my mom, she got her master's in marriage and family therapy, so she became a therapist. And so she was working all day, and I went to school, middle school and high school, and I would come home. And so I began to feel, in a sense, that I had freedom again. I didn't feel that as much around my father at the time. Of course, I've made up with all of that since then. I mean, I love my dad,
mm,
but I had this sense of freedom again, and I began to explore spirituality because my mom was exploring it, and I was looking up to her. She was in Native American circles, and she was doing what they call that all this high woo woo type stuff, right?
mm,
That I was very interested in. And New Age was very big back in the 90s too.
yeah. Mm.
So I picked up a book, and it's called Animal Speak by Tenda Andrews.
Oh, I
And
love him. Yeah, I've got his
yeah.
storybook. Yeah,
Oh, you do? Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love the way he writes. Yeah, great, great writer. Yeah.
I actually never read his fairy book, but I had the
Oh.
the animal book, and within that he talks about fairies, with butterflies and
Mm,
dragonflies, and so I looked at that, and then something opened up inside me, and I was like, oh wow, there I have this connection. So
mm,
then I started to go out into nature more, and wanting that connection, and exploring spirituality at the time. And so that was kind of my grow up period. And then I moved back to California for college, and I wanted to be somewhere beautiful. I didn't want to be in the suburbs anymore. So I picked this college. It was the only college that I applied to, and I got in. My test scores were horrible. They were
mm,
30% below average, but my grades were really good.
mm.
So I got into the school in Northern California called Humboldt State University, and now it's called, I think, Cal State Humboldt. I don't know. They changed the name of it, but it's where the redwoods
Yeah.
are. And
Yeah.
I always felt this. I love the big redwood trees, and when I was there, it was like home. I felt like, oh, I know these are my family. This is my family.
Oh,
You know,
yeah. Mm. And was it because of the redwoods, do you think, that helped you to make that decision, or was it a heart-led decision? Did you just feel, or intuitive feeling that you felt I just have to be here for some reason?
that
Yeah.
was it. It just felt
Yeah.
like I had to be there. And then I didn't think. I mean, I love the redwoods. I mean, I thought about the redwoods, but it wasn't like that's why I'm going. But then
Mm.
later on, I saw that it was almost like they were the ones that were calling me to be
Yeah.
there. And so,
Mm.
yeah, so and then, I can talk about my NDE, but I've lived in Australia. That was an amazing experience. I've lived in Germany. I've traveled to South America, so I've had amazing opportunities to kind of be all over
Yeah.
the place.
Where did you go?
Ireland.
Oh, in Ireland as well. Gosh.
I didn't actually
Yeah.
live there, but yeah, I went there.
Whereabouts did you go in Ireland? That's a place I've not been to yet. So yeah, where have you been? I mean, that's full of fairies or fairy belief.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, Selbridge, which is just outside of Dublin,
All right,
not
not been
just a little bit outside.
there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they definitely have fairies there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've got some friends in Ireland and Australia. That's another place I've been to in my 20s, and oh, such an amazing landscape there. Whereabouts did you travel to in Australia?
So I landed in Melbourne, and then
Yeah.
it just didn't really click for me. So I ended up taking a bus from Melbourne to a town called Tamworth in New South Wales. It's
Oh,
it's
okay.
north of Sydney,
Hmm.
and I worked on a sheep station for almost a month,
Oh,
and
great.
rode horses, and worked my butt off every day,
Hard
and
work, isn't it?
yeah, it's really hard work. It was amazing. I was so happy there. And
Hmm.
actually, Australia, my whole experience, I was very happy there. And then just traveled for a while, ended up coming to Adelaide, where I went to um, acting school. So this is
Oh,
after my NDE. I ended
mm.
up going to Australia a year after my NDE, and went to acting school, and just had a blast. And it was a year and a half program, and met some amazing people.
Oh
Uh,
gosh, that sounds incredible. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So where did you go when you were in
I
Australia?
I went from so we landed in Sydney and decided that we wanted to go further north and ended up living in Cairns for a couple of months because I had a working visa and I worked with the Aborigine people for a couple of months in their office. So I was working for the chairwoman of the Aboriginal Council. It was amazing. They just some of the probably the kindest people I've ever worked with. Um, and they're so appreciative of what I did. I mean, I was only doing some filing and answering the phone, but they were so overjoyed with with that, you know. So it was great. It was a great learning experience, yeah.
Is that the
And
only place that you stayed, or did you travel anywhere else?
we traveled back down to Melbourne, and then I lived in Melbourne for a few months. Um, but I preferred Cairns, to be honest. Yeah, I think I liked the people up there and the landscape. Mm.
It's a little slower, yeah.
Yeah, it's slower, because it's a city, but it's more like a town. It's slower pace. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I will go back one day with my children.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so do you want to talk about your near-death experience? And
Yeah.
yeah, great to hear about that.
So, so it was like, okay, so I arrived, I went to school, I started taking
Mm,
classes, and this depression, I guess you could call it depression, or the sadness,
mm,
was starting to bubble up inside me, like a feeling of homesickness. Now I still had the trees, I still had the elements. And my first year of college wasn't, it was actually a pretty good experience, but I felt like going into my second year, things started to become very difficult for me. And when I say difficult, I just had this real feeling in my body, my whole being, that I like, what is this place, Earth? Why am I here? I don't want to be here. This place is crazy, you know, and I don't. So I I was living in this beautiful place, but I felt like I was just very depressed. I guess that's the bottom line. It was a some might call it a clinical depression, although I never had seen a therapist at the time, or was taking any medication at the time. You know, a lot of kids go through this when they go to college and they're kind of separated from their home. I didn't really realize that at the time. I felt like I was the only one that was experiencing this. And I never thought about hurting myself. I didn't think that would be a fun experience. I just wanted to leave the planet. And so I started to have this conversation with the divine, with God, that, you know, please take me. Um, my way of kind of escaping from stresses from the school and just this feeling, what actually helped me, it wasn't really so much an escaping, was to go and to bike into the forest. And that's what helped me. Sometimes going to the
mm,
beach, because the beach wasn't too far away either.
mm,
And so that's what really kind of grounded me and helped me. I would go there and cry, and, you know, just talk to the trees. And
mm,
um, I had been dating somebody for a little while, starting in the summer before my second year, and I loved this person very much. And I felt, it was probably sometime in the middle of my second year, that I didn't deserve to be with this person, because I just didn't feel good enough about myself. So I
mm,
broke it off with her, and kind of it spiraled from there. I flunked the first class I ever flunked, which was philosophy, which I think is funny. Now I think it's funny. And so it got to the point after my second year, it was literally about a week after my second year. Um, I said, please, God, please, divine, whatever that word was for me at the time, please take me. I can't stand being here anymore. I don't want to be here. And it was about 4 days later
mm,
that I had my accident. So I was in the redwoods, the familiar trails. There's what they call I think it's called Arcata Community Forest. It's right behind the college, and it's filled with and I don't know what it's like now. I haven't been back there in years, but it's filled with second growth redwood trees, which means that they cut down the first ones and then they replanted, and that was well over 100 years ago. So they were second growth, still very tall, still 250, 300 feet tall.
Gosh. Yeah.
And yeah,
Mm.
yeah, amazing trees. And so, yeah, I was in the forest. It was morning time. The fog was just starting to clear, the morning fog. I was headed back to wherever. I didn't know at that point. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was headed basically out of the woods, and I was going down a hill where there's several jumps, and I always took these jumps. It was a familiar trail. I never wore a helmet. Um, I didn't just I wasn't an intense mountain biker or an extremist or a sports enthusiast.
Mm.
I just thought I'd always be okay because I knew what I was doing. So I hit the last jump before basically exiting the woods. It was probably another 100 yards or so before the end of the woods, and I hit the last jump. And as soon as I hit it, I realized that somebody had built it way up. So within just a few days of me taking the jump before, somebody had packed the dirt around it and made it really
Yeah.
steep. And so my body, my muscle memory wasn't used to it. And so as soon as I headed, it was almost like there probably wasn't really any thought, but it was a knowing that this was it. It was
Mm.
almost like this is it. And then it just happened so fast. So I came down on my front tire, my handlebars, and I just rolled. So it was like my head, my neck, and then my back slammed against the earth. And I was out. I mean, I don't remember anything until the next moment, which was
Mm.
when I was me, meaning spirit, whatever that name is, was floating above the trees, right where the crowns are of the redwood trees.
Mm.
And I didn't have a body. It was just more of a space of consciousness, and that's where I was hanging out. I was
Mm.
just there. It was like all of a sudden I was there. I felt light. I felt a sense of familiarity. I felt connected, and I also began to sense and feel the elements around me. Um, so I would feel like the wind moving through me or moving through this part of me. I could actually feel this like you would feel the wind hitting your body, Claire, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um,
incredible.
and then I could see like my vision. Did you want to talk? I'm sorry, you're curious.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. Um, just that sense of when you talk about, I mean, I get that sense of freedom from what you're saying. That you, is that what you were feeling, or was it just not any sort of connection with human experience at all? It just was. Is that
It just was,
it just
and
was?
it felt free.
Yeah.
It was a feeling of freedom.
Mm.
And there's no in this space, and I don't know what, I some people might analyze it and say, oh, you were astral traveling. You didn't have some people say you didn't have a full NDE because I didn't go through any lights or talk to any beings. For me, this is what this, I'll just tell you this is how it
Mm.
was. And I just tell people
Yeah.
this is how it was. So because I feel like I had developed that connection with nature over the last few years through the end of high school and then just going into college, this was my experience. And I could just like the colors were incredible. I could see the detail of the redwoods down to the little tiny morning fog dew on the needles.
Mm.
I could hear I could hear birds way off in the distance, but it felt like they were right here.
Mm.
As dogs as well barking, but it felt like they were very close.
Yeah.
Um, I could I could hear the ocean because the ocean's about 5 miles away. I could hear that could hear the waves. I could feel the rhythm. So it was a feeling of real connection, but the connection wasn't with people, it was with nature. And
Mm.
that's what became, you know, kind of that's why it became important to me more and more to be with the earth and be with nature.
So you're saying that really that time, it's this idea of reciprocity, isn't it? That when we spend time in a place, that we can build a relationship with it. So by you going back to this place time and again and talking to the place and sharing your emotions, that you'd built this kind of resonance and relationship with the place, so that yeah, so that was the major part of your yeah, it fascinates me that you'd called out and said, I want to go, and then it's almost like, okay, they heard you, whoever they are, and then you had this experience in this place that you've got this relationship with, and it didn't happen on a road. It was, or somewhere else. It was in this very special place for you.
Yeah.
Just an observation.
And thank I guess you could say thank goddess for that,
Mm,
because I wouldn't have it any other way, really. And um, yeah, that it was perfect, and it was supposed to happen. And maybe if I never even felt depression, or maybe if I never even asked for this,
mm,
it still might have happened. And just you don't know, right? I mean, it was almost like it was supposed to happen to wake me up, and I knew, like, I looked down at my body, Claire, and I saw
mm.
that body all twisted up, and I was there was a it was almost like, oh, that depression isn't me, that person isn't me, this is me. That's what it felt like. This is me.
Yeah.
And and it's like in life in general, we believe that we're all of these experiences, we're all of these pains that we hold, we're all of these things, but it's not really who we are. Who we are is a mystery, but there's a familiarity, I
Mm,
feel like, with knowing who we are, even though we might not know exactly who we are.
mm.
um, there's an essence, I guess you could say.
Yes.
So yeah, so I
Mm,
looked down at my body and I saw
mm,
that, and then there was this, you could say, like, what I would say, like a direct cognition, or just a knowing, or a feeling, a question: do you want to go back, or do you want to go further? And I said, I don't want to die. And it was an instant. It wasn't like my ego saying, or any, it was just like, I don't want to die. And as soon as I said that, that's when I was back in my body. I believe to be back in my body, at least. And that's when I began. I came back, and it was like coming back into my body, and then feeling all of the pain from the accident, feeling the muscle twitches, the electrical pain, trying to catch my breath because I had knocked my breath out. So I was trying to breathe, was taking these deep breaths. My eyes were still closed, so I began to open them slowly,
mm.
and that's when I had I guess you could say, I was talking about this with somebody else the other day. This was still a part of your NDE. I guess it was, because that's when I had opened my eyes and began to see the fairies
Mm.
coming down from the trees, because I was surrounded by the redwoods when I was on the ground. Um, they were dive bombing. They were going up. I heard little giggles. So I was temporarily taken away from the pain by having this wasn't just a vision because my eyes were open, but
Yeah.
um, this feeling, or this experience with the fairies. So
And
yeah,
sorry. How long
no,
did that,
please, please.
how long, so yeah, how long did that last for? That, do you know? I mean, time-wise, I mean, I know you're on a different timeline at that time, but
Right.
yeah,
I, I have no way of knowing. I
no,
don't. Are you talking about with the fairies? Are you talking about the whole
yeah.
thing?
Well,
The,
that part with the fairies coming down,
yeah.
um, so they seemed joyful then that you were back. Is that how you'd
I,
interpret it? Or
I
they,
don't I don't know what they were joyful about, but they were definitely joyful. I don't
mm,
maybe you're picking up on that I was back. Yeah, that could be very true. Um,
yeah,
but they were joyful and they were bringing joy to a traumatic experience, being in a
mm,
body full of pain, just having crashed my mountain bike. They were bringing joy to that, and it wasn't like it didn't it felt joyful from them. I could feel their joy and their happiness,
mm.
and with their little giggles and um,
Yeah, there's a few things about that that I want to ask. Sorry to interrupt, but if you carry on, Tyler,
please
sorry.
do.
I'm just really
No, please
excited
do.
about this. Um, so giggling is I've heard giggling when I've been in around woodlands and places that are associated with fairies, on a psychic level. Um, and many people have had fairy experiences, have heard giggling as well. Um, and it's interesting you saying that they're dive bombing you. So were they sort of, is that in a playful way, just sort of diving down from the trees to, yeah?
Yeah. So it wasn't like they were attacking me. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, so what my experience, almost like a dragonfly, how how dragonflies can move like almost like a helicopter and they can
Yeah.
move any direction. That's how
Mm,
it was. So they would come down, they would move up, sometimes stop, move around, go back up. So there wasn't any one direct pattern. I think the dive bombing part probably happened uh, in the beginning, but they
yeah.
would fly around me, and then it was almost like here we are, and then I don't know how many there were. They were a colony, maybe there were
Mm,
15, maybe there were 30 of them. I wasn't sitting there counting them. It was because you're having this experience, you're not trying to
yeah.
analyze
Sure. Yeah.
anything, right? So,
Yeah. But
um,
what did you notice about their appearance, if anything?
okay, so I don't do fairy research like you do. So I don't really know what's a fairy, what's a fae, what's a sprite,
Oh,
anything like that. But
yeah.
they had like a drag. Well, I don't even know if dragonflies, but they had four wings, two going
Mm,
up and two going down. Um, some of them appeared like they didn't have any. Some of them appeared like they had like these loose garments on.
mm,
Some of them appeared as if they were naked, but I mean, as naked as a fairy can be, I guess.
yeah.
That's a weird thing to say.
Naked as a-
um, different color
Yeah.
skin. Um, there were some that were brown. I would say most of them were. Some of them were kind of yellowish, but I'd say most of them were like white, kind of whitish.
Okay.
Um, I don't remember like they didn't I couldn't see like the total detail, but they look like basically in a way like little humans
Mm,
that could fly, that had wings. They
oh,
had feet and arms and stuff like that. So, and they were very much the redwoods. That was their home.
yeah.
That was their place. And um, so so I don't know time, Claire. It's like
Mm,
fairy time,
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
That's the other aspect of it that interests me is this missing time because um in fairy lore there's this idea of people being taken into the fairy realm and it's like this timeless, the time is different there. So whereas like an hour in fairyland might be a day in the
Mm,
human world. Um, and then I know you're going to talk a bit more about your experience in a moment about this idea of missing time and what happened in between. How did you get from one place to another, which we'll come on to in a moment, which fascinates me as well. Um, yeah, and the other thing is that mentioning dragonflies before you came on, I pulled a medicine card and it was dragonfly. It's about dragonfly medicine. So that's amazing that
sweet.
yeah, that you're talking about dragonflies. Yeah. Um, can I ask you before we move on? I've got some questions for this
Yeah,
part. Um, that I've got a wonderful friend called Neil Rushton, who's a fairy researcher, and I knew that he would want to ask you a question, so I said, "You're coming on." Um, so Neil, sorry, Neil asks, could the entities that you experienced during your NDE be the same entities experienced by people not having an NDE? So, and he's explained himself by saying, what I mean by this is, could there be a form of entity or energy or life force that is existing in a ulterior reality or dimension that is able to appear and interact with us both when we are living in a physical reality and also when our consciousness leaves our body? Does that make sense? Make sense? Um, and Neil says, I think you'll guess that I think there is. But I'd be interested to hear what Tyler thinks. Yeah.
okay. Would you mind breaking up that question just a little bit, starting with the
Yeah.
first part, please?
So is there a form of entity or energy or life force that is existing both in another dimension and that is able to appear and interact with us both when we are living in this reality and when our consciousness leaves our body? So in other words, do you think these beings that you saw in as part of your NDE, would you'd be able to see them in your waking reality now? I think that's
Mm,
what you're saying.
yes, I believe that.
Mm. Yeah,
That's the short answer.
yeah. Okay.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate the question, Neil. I'm open and curious, probably like you are, like
Mm,
both of you are. I don't have the answers. I know what I saw.
yeah.
I do believe that the fairies are in a higher dimension, maybe not a real higher one, but they're in a higher dimension of what I call Earth, higher dimension of this planet, um, and that they can appear to us physically, not just in the visual sense, but or meaning the inner eye or the third eye, or closing your eyes and having inner vision. But I do believe that they can appear,
Mm,
and I'm pretty much I guess I'm proof of that, even though
yeah.
I felt like when I was above the trees, I felt like I was in this higher dimension of Earth because the colors and just the feelings and everything was so real. Um, but I believe that humans can have the ability, and many of us are right now at these strange times, to elevate our own consciousness and our own body's energy,
Mm.
um, so that we can interact with them. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting because a lot of people I know, including myself, feel like at the moment, I mean, in the last few years especially, there's some kind of shift in energy going on. where we can interact with these beings more easily, whatever kind of dimension we believe they're from, whether it's fairies or extraterrestrials or other, cryptids or other beings. There seems to be a kind of a build up or acceleration of people having these experiences. Have you noticed that? Or you,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you can see it all over YouTube, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not just,
yeah.
it's not, and I don't believe anybody has to have a near-death experience to experience it.
Mm,
I think it's about, I think it's about the changes that are happening, and the people that are involved. In other words, because you mentioned this earlier, because I had this resonance with nature. My experience was with nature, right? And fairies are very much, they're the guardians of the plants and the trees and the
yeah,
forests. That they are guardians. So, and some people might, they might be really into ETs, so they
mm,
might begin to see UFOs flying around. So I think it has a lot to do with the um, our belief system and what we believe spiritually.
yes,
That's how we're going to have that experience, whatever that is. And even if people are out there, like, there might be some people in your audience that haven't had any experiences and are wanting that. I believe it's coming for them too.
yeah,
And just to be patient, because yeah, just to be patient and to be open to it, and that anything can happen, because we are in a time where anything can happen.
yeah. Um,
So back, do you want me to go back to
yeah,
my
go back.
laying on the
Sorry,
ground?
sorry,
It's
go back. Let's
okay.
go back to laying on the ground. I'm going off on a tangent. Yeah,
No, it's
carry
great.
on.
I love
Thanks.
tangents.
Yeah, thanks.
So
Mm,
yeah, no problem. Like, so the whole no time, don't know how much time, but it almost felt like it was like the fairy experience was first, and then I began to hear this ringing sound,
mm,
these ringing tones, I guess you could say. And I knew it was the trees. Now, the trees can communicate to each other. We all know that they're very connected with their root system. But I never heard anything like this before. So it was like it could have been my inner ears, but it was like it was real. It was like me being having a conversation with you, and then all of a sudden hearing these ringing tones. But I knew instantly it was the trees. And with those tones, I could feel these rushes of energy moving through my body. So I knew that the trees were helping me adjust or to heal or whatever, come back to earth, no pun intended. Um, it was really, I knew it was the trees. And I attribute it to a Tibetan singing bowl. Maybe that's the closest thing I can think of, the Tibetan singing bowl. So, so this was happening. The fairies were still there. And then I remembered I was still in a body. And when I remembered I was still in a body, that's when the pain started becoming really intense. And it was like, oh. And as soon as I could feel this pain, my consciousness is like it didn't want to be there anymore, and it was out. Now I had already made the decision that, sorry, I'm scratching. There's a lot of allergies today.
oh,
Um, but there's so I had already made the decision, I guess, this bigger part of me that I
yeah.
didn't want to die, right? But
Mm,
when I felt the pain, it was like, I didn't even think. It was just like out. And then the next thing I remember, again, I had no concept of time other than the hospital records that show when I had arrived and what happened. I woke up. I just heard a man's voice. He had almost like a perm style, really curly hair and these spectacles on. And he was the emergency doctor, and he was leaning over me. And it was another surreal experience.
yeah, sounds a bit like sounds a bit like Einstein.
Kind of like that. I mean, he had a mustache, and it was yeah, so he was like, "Are you awake? Can you hear me? You're really lucky, is what I heard. You're really lucky. Uh, you didn't break anything. I didn't break any
Mm.
bones after this accident. You're really lucky." And I remember just opening my eyes and not really, I mean, feeling the pain a little bit, but I was probably dosed up at that time. So by that time on painkillers, and he was asking me, "So once I was awake, so what's your name?" And had no idea. He's like, "What town are you in?" And I didn't know. "Do you go to Humboldt State?" I didn't know. "Are you a man or a woman?" Didn't know that one either. Didn't know anything. And then he
Yeah.
asked me if I knew anybody's number in town, and I
Mm.
just blurted out a number. It just came out of nowhere. It came out of somewhere, obviously,
Mm.
but I blurted out the number, and it was a friend of my parents. It was a family friend who had retired there in the town of Arcata at the time, and so that was the number they called. And I left the hospital that late afternoon, early evening to go back to their house and then just kind of figure out stuff from there. So
Yeah. Gosh, that's so lucky, isn't it, that you actually could remember that number and they were able to take you in.
yeah,
'Cause I'm interested in Tyler, how you got from the forest to the hospital.
me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess an ambulance picked me up because that's on the record as well, that an ambulance
Mm.
picked me up. But who called? They there's no record of who called. Somebody might have There's somebody that could have found me. But there's no like cell phone records or phone records of anybody calling, which I think
Mm.
is very odd. That's
That's
another kind of
strange. Yeah.
anomaly.
God.
Um,
Mm.
so because I wanted to figure out later on, who helped me. You want to know
Yeah.
those kinds of things. And in the records, they said, "Oh, nobody. We don't have a record of anybody calling in your accident." Now, it could have been another mountain biker that knew an EMT and called the EMT. I really don't know what happened. So because I had
Mm.
no memory of it and there's
Mm.
no record of it. So I don't know if it's some magical, fairy hotline, maybe they
Yeah.
called, or then they
Yeah.
erased it, or if it was just something that's um, they never wrote it down on the hospital
Mm.
the record or something. So yeah,
Mm.
that's a good question.
I mean, there's a brilliant book called Time Storms by a writer called Jenny Randalls.
Time
Um,
storms. I have to
yeah,
write that
Time
down.
Storms, English. She's an English writer, Jenny Randalls. Brilliant book. It's mostly sort of connected to, well, lots of strange phenomena, really. It's interesting you say about the mists, because there are things, connected with fairies and strange, missing time occurrences connected with mist as well. I mean, I know that's part of that part of the world with the fog coming in. Um, and also lots of people that have just suddenly found themselves 200 miles away from where they were in their car, for example. They're driving on a highway and then all of a sudden they're in another state, they
Wow,
couldn't have got there within the time frame. Maybe only half an hour has gone and they're 6 hours away or something.
that's
So,
so interesting.
yeah. So it just makes me think, they might be it just feels to me as well. I mean, I don't want to put my interpretation too much on your very personal experience, but I mean, do you feel like this was a setup? I mean, like somebody's built up this ramp so that you take on and you don't realize it's built up, and then you sort of that wish fulfillment. You're asking for this experience, and then somehow you get to the hospital, so to make sure you're okay, and there's a family waiting to look after you. I mean, it's just it all feels like I mean, do you feel like this is some kind of, like the Truman Show, like sort of set
Oh,
up?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
orchestrated
like
in
an
some way.
orchestrated.
Yeah,
I think it was in a way. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
even though, the the dirt jump, maybe it wasn't, maybe that person just wanted to, build that up for their own entertainment. They weren't thinking, oh, this is gonna hurt
yeah,
somebody.
sure, no, yeah,
So
yeah,
they were like they were a piece of the
mm,
puzzle.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah,
I
so
see what you're saying.
not
So
in a
it's like,
malicious. Yeah,
yeah, not in but who knows? It's like
mm,
it's predetermined in a way. I kind of believe that, um, not so much in fate, but it's almost like it was supposed to happen
yeah,
exactly the way it happened. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. It's very
mm,
weird because I filled out a form on one of the major, I'm not going to mention names, but the major website that deals with NDEs. And so I had to answer these questions, and it was like they were asking if it was verified, and I'm thinking, well, it's verified by me.
mm,
What's the verification they need? I have hospital records if they need it. So I was marking like no verified, yes. So I was thinking, okay, so what really what's considered verified? Well, verified in my experience is the experience that you have.
yeah,
Maybe you don't have, and then being open to the mystery of it, not needing to
mm,
know exactly why it's happening or how it played out, but
sure,
it just happened, and that's what happened. That's just the way it happened.
yeah, and that's kind of part of the whole package in a way, isn't it? That maybe that there are things that we're not meant to know, or that was just part of the mystery part of it is all part of that personal experience for you. Mm,
Yeah. And if we're meant to know it, we're meant to know it,
mm,
at the right time. So, so, maybe I won't know until I leave this body exactly what happened, but I'm totally fine with that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So sorry, so carry on. You were talking about you'd got to your friend's house, or friend of the family's house, and going through time to recover there.
yeah,
So,
so I want to say it was about a week. It was
mm,
because the hospital didn't want me to travel for about a week. They just wanted me to rest. So I was there for about a week. I was in tremendous pain. I took painkillers, but I didn't like how they made me feel. I felt like when I was walking around that they weren't really doing good because I could feel all this pain in my back and my legs and my head. I had a concussion. That was a big part of it, was hitting my head and having a concussion. So my memory wasn't great. I wasn't at this time. I wasn't thinking about my NDE experience. I mean, there was little flashes coming in, little pieces of the puzzle came in over the years, and I'd say, within a few months to almost a year, as I was healing my body, that's when I started to remember a lot more of it. Um, so my so my mom came down to get me from Washington State, um, about a week later, and I flew back up with her and began to see some traditional medicine doctors. Decided that they weren't helping me; they were just giving me more pills and saying to heal up, and that's not how I wanted to heal up. So I, um, had a referral from another family friend, one of my mom's best friends, about this man who does something called network chiropractic. I know that they have them all over the world now, and it deals with what they call network spinal analysis. It deals with the spine but
Right.
it's not just a it's a very non-invasive chiropractic, and it believes that the body can has its own self-healing mechanism. Um, and a lot of the people that do network chiropractic are healers. There's a certain training that they go through. So this man he still is, he practices in another state now, and he began to I saw him, I think, 3 times a week, and then twice a week, and then once a week, and then once every 2 weeks, something like that. And he really helped me um, heal my body, but also in doing so, it brought up all of the emotions, the insecurities, the depression, everything that I was feeling that I didn't want to feel before was being resurfaced, but it didn't I wasn't it's almost like I couldn't hold it. It was so intense. It was able to just to move on through, just to move on through a lot easier when I had this help from
Mm.
this gentleman, and then just doing my own work. But he helped me tremendously. I hope he knows that. I think I've written him a few times, letting him know how much he helped me. If I
And,
haven't, then
mm,
I'm gonna need to do that.
and Tyler, did that sort of, did you feel the depression gradually lift? Because um, was it a gradual process that you gradually, the depression that you were experiencing before your accident and NDE, did that gradually lift? I mean, how long did it take for you to sort of start to feel some relief from those feelings?
Okay, so the physical body stuff took about 6 to 9 months for me to fully
Mm,
heal my neuromuscular damage, and I did that with his assistance.
mm,
As that was going on, I was feeling this depression. That was a very much ingrained in me. So it took several years, and
mm,
there's still moments today that I get depressed, but it's not like it was. It's a feeling that I can move through fairly quickly. I've just kind of trained my body how to do that, and so if there's like a real down feeling of depression, it's able now to move through. It could be like 10 minutes and it'll be gone completely. But back then, I would say the intensity continued to last 4 to 5 years, even though I was traveling, in
mm.
Australia, that was still there, it was still present. But I had a different perspective on it now. I had a different understanding of it, that it wasn't me. Like when I was floating above the trees, this isn't me. This is
Yeah.
my physiology, and it's also part of my psychology, my
Mm,
beliefs, stuff like that. That's just coming up to be looked at and fully looked at. And then when you fully look at something, then it's just able to pass through you. So so it's not like I'm living in bliss today, even though
mm.
I feel I'm internally very secure and happy with myself. But it took time there. I mean,
Yeah.
I can say 4 to 5 years, starting from
Mm.
1997, but I can also look back at the moments in time when I was still pretty depressed, and then it would lift.
Yeah.
And I even tried medication for a while. That didn't
Mm.
work for me. That actually made me more numb. So I was like, okay, what am I doing? I believe in all this holistic stuff. So I tried that for a few months, and I didn't like how it felt. And I knew that I could continue to work on my own body chemistry, and just allow it to be if it comes up, and
Mm.
not try to push it away. And when you allow something to be completely, then it's just able to move through if you're not thinking so much.
Yeah. And I just want to say that which you'll probably come to about in a moment, but you are a wonderful healer yourself. And I know there'll be people listening to this that can identify with your experience of depression. Um, and it'd be wonderful to hear any words that you have for people that are going through a similar experience. I mean, your story is very inspiring, but I expect people will be interested in, some of the things that you've tried and that have worked for you, that help you now to maintain well-being.
So, coming from somebody that's not a psychiatrist or a therapist or a doctor,
Yeah, sure.
I
Yeah,
can't give advice.
no.
However, I can only tell you what's worked for me.
Mm,
Um, I guess the major part of it is not to push it away. I found. The other thing is there's nothing wrong with you, no matter what you're going through. There's nothing wrong with you. This is just a part of your life, and hopefully at some point you'll see that it's a beautiful part of your life. Um, I've learned to love it almost like I'm separating myself from it, like I'm observing, like a witness, and then am able to. And I know this isn't easy. That's like you see this in kind of the non-dual teachings of spirituality, where you're not the mind, you're not the body.
mm,
But it goes back to a lot of the Hindu traditions of being able to just kind of watch it. And when you watch something, just kind of becoming a watcher of this depression, this feeling. When you can watch it, then it can be very intense. I understand. It can move through you a lot quicker. We don't have to understand exactly what it is, because I believe that's what stops it. If we say, okay, well, I just went through a divorce and he took all my money. Um, there's always something deeper than the external thing that might have caused you depression. You have just lost your job. I know all of these things are very difficult.
mm,
Um, but what I found personally is to make it more self-reflective, to kind of take the mind off of the event or the situation that might have caused you the depression, and just kind of focus on um, yourself and allowing it to be. And I don't want to make it sound easy, because I know it's not, but I think it's also important to talk to people, at least that have gone through some form of depression, whether that be a therapist, whether that be your best friend. If you actually talk to fairies, fairies might be able to help you too, and the earth.
mm,
you know my I guess in a way my therapist has always been the earth and trees, and asking for help, laying on the earth. She'll take care of you. Putting your back against a tree or hugging a tree, they'll take care of you. So these
mm.
might be temporary, or they might be instantaneous. Sometimes the earth can heal something instantaneous for you. Um, Writing is also another thing that's helped me. Just writing a lot. Um, Definitely talking to people. I didn't talk to people enough in my earlier days, but I became more comfortable with myself than I could talk to people. I'm just kind of rambling on here
Yeah,
now,
no,
Claire,
no,
but
it's all
yeah,
good. And
yeah,
I can identify with some of those things, and especially, I would say for me, exercise or exercising in
yes,
nature, cycling, getting out on my bike, going for a good walk, especially in nature, and like you say, connecting with trees, um, talking to nature, talking to the trees, and talking to people that understand. Um, and did you share, just going back to when your mum picked you up, did you share with her your experience? Or did you tell anyone about your near-death experience then? Or is it something that you kept to yourself? Or did you share it with her? Because you're saying she's quite spiritually
yeah.
minded.
So eventually I did, as it was
Mm,
coming back to me, but it was mostly keeping it to myself, and
mm,
I've pretty much kept it to myself for 24 years. I've told a few people along the way, and then I just noticed that they're like, they either kind of looked at me weird, or they weren't really listening to me. So I'm like, okay, so I'm not telling the right people.
Mm.
It was a time also in the 90s, in the early part of this century, that it wasn't a huge thing, and I there's not a lot of there wasn't a lot of research done, and there weren't a lot of people that I could actually reach out to that wouldn't think that I was probably going nuts, or who the heck is this guy? So I felt like it was too sacred for me to share as I was
Yeah.
receiving more of these memories.
Mm.
It was too important for me, and yeah, it wasn't until really until about a year and a half ago, I started to do some writing. I saw more people were having near death experiences. I noticed that, okay, so well, other people are having um, experiences with fairies. So, okay, so I
Mm.
can talk about that. And um, so, yeah, it wasn't, and then but it was my mom. I would tell her different things. I would tell it probably to her in pieces as I was getting it in pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she's always been incredibly supportive. So she believes me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
lovely that you have that support from her. And yeah, it's great, isn't it? Um I have a close relationship with my mum, even though I suppose my beliefs are quite different to hers. But I was just I was on Joe Hickey Hall's podcast a few weeks ago. She's got a podcast called the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, and I told her about my experience with my mum of seeing a fairy um, on Dartmoor, near where I live in Devon in the UK. The fairies here are called pixies. And
Okay.
yeah, and we were out in a garden together. This is 2016. And we were walking along side by side. We just had been having a laugh about something, and we were walking past a log, and it's literally the log was to my left, and out the corner of my eye, I could see a little person sat on the end of the log. And I
Nice.
turned to my mum and I said, "Oh, look, there's a pixie." And she said, "Oh, yeah, a pixie." So we both saw it at the same time. It's just a
Oh,
split second. And for a moment, she stepped into my world, you know. I've only seen fairies a few times like that, mostly third eye or as I'm drifting off to sleep or in visions, meditation. But that was really precious. So yeah, it's lovely to be able to share these things, isn't it? If you can share it with someone close to you, it's
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
makes
that's
it really
beautiful.
special.
So,
Yeah,
so she was just open to that at that moment when
at
she
that
was with you.
at
Yeah.
that moment. And the thing was that I think it's something to do with a few things that we were in light spirits, so we were laughing about something, and fairies are very much on that vibration. They're quite
Yeah.
light and joyful on the whole. I mean, there's different types of fairies, but the other thing was, unknown to both of us, she was also in a bit of a liminal place at that time because she was a few months later, about 6 months later, she was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm,
So, I mean, she's still having treatment now. So it's almost like this liminal space that she was in,
mm,
maybe made it more easier for her to access that realm.
yeah. I'm sorry to hear about that,
Yeah, yeah. She's a
but I'm
yeah, yeah. It's
but
interesting.
that makes sense. Yeah, being in kind of both worlds in a way, um, or just being able to be more open to that. Um,
Yeah, it's the I think you've said this, I've heard you say this, and your work as well is connected with the heart, isn't it? And being open-hearted is definitely, that's why I believe it's the way to connect with the fairies. Um,
Yes.
to be, yeah,
Yeah, because they pick up on that, just like your cat, right?
yeah,
Yeah, or any animal really. When you're in a space
mm,
where you feel like your heart's open, and women are a lot easier have a lot easier time to doing this than men. Hopefully, men will catch up. But
yeah,
having their hearts open is just comes naturally,
mm.
and animals want to be around that. And that's the same with fairies. And I'll just tell you, I don't mean to interrupt your
No,
story
carry on. No, I'm
with your
finished.
mom.
Yeah.
Okay. But
Mm.
that's what happened with me. I would say several months before my accident, I was really in love with this woman, and my heart was just pounding open. And I think she was in the other room, and I was laying on her bed, and she lived in this house, and of course there were redwoods everywhere. And that's when I could see them in my inner vision. It was like my heart was really open, and I could see them in clarity as I had seen them when I was on the ground. I could see them just flying around, around my third eye vision. So yeah,
But
being in that space of joy and your heart being open, I think that helps
yeah,
a lot.
they're attracted to that love energy, definitely. Yeah. They're also a bit naughty, I think. They like that sort of connection between couples, because there's all these stories about people going into the woods at May time and encountering fairies, couples.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like an old tradition over here, the May Day traditions, which is
Oh wow.
Beltane. It's a fire festival, and that's one of the times of the year when the fairies come out. So if you go into the woods, um, yeah, it's supposed to be one of those times when you can see the fairies.
Oh cool. I have a lot
Yeah.
to learn from you, Claire. I have a lot to learn from you. That's great.
Yeah.
You
Can
should
I?
have you written a book or anything?
I am writing a book at the moment.
Good.
I'm writing a book about the fairies and the landscape in the southwest of England. So the pixies, as we call them here, and all the places that they're connected with. So there's loads and loads of places here that they're associated with. So that's what I'm writing about at the moment. Um, yeah, because I like you, I just love nature, and yeah, especially this part of the world. I've got a question
Yeah.
connected to nature actually,
Yeah.
from my friend Emma. So she asked, how did your NDE alter your relationship with nature?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think I believe that I had that connection prior to it,
Yeah.
and it felt strong. I would say that it after my NDE, it felt like I needed to still be in nature. I felt like it had grown into just this reverence and respect,
Mm,
and as it is today, just this total respect. Um, I'm this little tiny being on a planet, in a universe in a galaxy, and then we have this thing called Mother Nature, who's this power. So
mm,
it's she. Uh, I say she because it is a she. This planet. Um, she could take our life away in a second, and she gives us life. Our bodies are nature. We are part of her. So just coming into that understanding, um, and just having this respect, I believe it just became a natural part. So when I traveled to Australia, I would talk to the water there and respect the land and saying, okay, land, I'm here now. Thank you for letting me be here. I went to Ireland, I would do the same thing, wherever I would go. And then here in Hawaii, it's almost like if you don't respect the land, then the elements will show you that it's
ah,
time to respect it. You
Yeah.
know, we have volcanoes here,
Mm.
earthquakes, and big storms sometimes. So it's I believe, to answer Emma's question, that's probably the best way I could answer, is just my becoming more respectful and just talking with it, and having a conversation with it, and asking questions. You know, if you're not going to hear anything from the wind if you don't ask questions, or you're not going to understand a tree if you don't ask how it's doing. So just, it's not separate from us. It's part of us being here on Earth. Uh, since we are a part of nature, we might as well have a relationship with it like anything else. And that's what's become important for me over the years. Um,
Yeah. And having that really heightened experience of nature as well, like you're saying, with the increased level of the sound and feeling and that sensory experience you had. Um, that's all part of it, right?
yeah,
This sort of, yeah.
I think so.
Mm,
I think it's almost like, once we raise the light in ourselves, in our
mm,
body, it's like the landscape becomes more beautiful than it ever has been. And I
mm.
believe that there's still like a higher dimension of Earth, and that's right here, kind of overlaid on top of this one. So it's again, there's no real separation. And the reason why I feel that in my cells, I feel that that's a true statement, is because when I go to sleep, or when I have any kind of visions, um, a lot of the time the redwoods will still be there, and
Oh,
they'll
wow.
they'll be around me. And there's this
Mm,
one that's huge. It's almost like a, um, I don't know how big it is. It's huge, and I see that as one of my guides, and it's
mm.
just reminding me to stay grounded, and that it's also telling me that there's magic, everywhere. So
Yeah,
they're
there
still
is
around.
magic. Yeah, there is magic. And I printed off something actually to do with the redwoods. Again, thank you, Emma. Emma sent me about the sequoias. I don't know if you read anything about what they mean. This is from a website. Just give her credit. Uh, oh, I thought I'd written it down. I'll have to put it in the notes. Oh, it's called treespiritwisdom.com. Laurel Waters, she's called. And she's got a page about sequoia, and it means courage.
Mm,
And the message of the sequoia is a powerful and courageous spirit that balances destruction and creation. It asks us to decide if we want to be a destroyer species or a restorer species.
mm,
And the question is, what are we ready to let die in order for something new to live?
mm.
That's just
That's beautiful.
part of it. I'll send you the link because,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I thought, well, it's quite relevant to your experience, really. Those, the courage and yeah. Mm,
So yeah, even with so there's coastal redwoods, and they're
yeah.
part of the sequoia family, and then there's the
Mm,
sequoias on inland, in a different part of California, and they're
right.
really, really big. So you see but the coastal redwoods are the majority of the ones that they cut down over the last 100 or so years. Used to be as big as the um, huge sequoias that you see at Sequoia National Park, I guess, is
Okay.
where they are.
Yeah.
And but there's still a few of the huge ones that you can find, but it doesn't matter, big or small. I mean,
Mm,
they're still magical. So the cedar family, I didn't know this. I heard that ringing sound. I didn't actually hear. I read in a book. I don't know if you heard of the Anastasia, um, the Ringing Cedars series.
no,
But
no. Sounds good.
it's
Yeah.
about this woman who lives in I think it's called the taiga in Siberia, and she's very connected to nature. She actually, the bears come and talk to her. It's a real story.
Right.
And so she talks about the cedars ringing,
Mm.
and that's what the book is called, The Ringing Cedars. So
Wow.
I read that years later, and I was like, yes, that's what I experienced, the ringing cedars. I wonder if I have the book anywhere. I don't have it right with me,
That sounds amazing.
unfortunately.
I
Yeah.
can look it up and put it in the notes
Yeah.
for this show. Could you talk about, Tyler, your wonderful work and um, which has been obviously part of this journey, a big part of your journey to get to the work that you offer people and what you do and how people can connect with you.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm.
So so my work, I feel like my work's always kind of evolving.
Mm.
I had practical training in different forms of massage therapy, such as deep tissue, Swedish Lomi Lomi,
Mm.
neuromuscular therapy. I had all of these trainings, and so I had my own practice for years with hands-on body work. And um, I think I began to combine a lot of them, such as the cranial sacral with deep tissue, for example. And as I was doing this, I began to notice when people would start to talk about things, I began to notice where they would show up in their body, and I could actually see them like through the body and see what was happening when they were talking about stuff. And then I'd begin to notice that there would be an energy, through my hands that would just see that like these molecules would disappear as they would talk about it. And so they would come back, maybe a week later and say, this issue that I had with my childhood or with my husband or with work is no longer there. So I began to see that it was something more than just the body, that it showed up in the body. Um, so so then I had learned years ago what they call quantum healing from this woman. She's the one that kind of introduced it, and she never wanted to be big out in the world, so she only taught a select few people. So that was one of the modalities that I learned.
Mm.
And then I began to kind of do my own thing. So I would see these things happening, and people would talk to me, and um, I would hold a space so that it could actually bring energy to not just their body, but to any area of their life. And then I didn't have to do hands-on anymore, which I kind of preferred because I was getting burnt out from body work after 20 years. And so I was at the point now where I can work remotely with somebody, and wherever they are in their life right now, it's like I'm not a therapist, but I tend to hold a space um, for them to be able to help heal themselves too. So it's not like me doing it. It's a space where they can have insights. There is an energy aspect, there is a wisdom aspect, but sometimes people will just get on a call with me and start crying, and they said, I can't believe I'm crying. I don't know why. So I don't even know what's going on, but I know that to a regard, it's because I've gone through so much in my
Yeah.
life, um, emotionally and physically, and just with a lot of things, that I'm able to open up that space for them to
Mm.
heal quickly. And sometimes it can be just them talking the whole time. Sometimes it can be where I guide them through a process,
Mm.
or I'll see something and I'll explain to them, okay, so I see this, whatever this is in your body. I want you to think about this. So there might be some images that they hold in their mind. But it's very intuitive and very kind of organic, and it really depends on each person. And so that's what I'm doing now. And with people that feel called to do that, I'm not, that I don't really advertise. I don't advertise at all. I mean, I have interviews with people and I tell people what I'm doing, but
Yeah.
I'm not like doing Facebook ads or, even in my videos, I don't really talk about the work I do. So if people are interested, I have a website. I do it by donation only, so I can open it up to more people. I used to charge 150 a session, but now it's like I knew that I was cutting off people that I couldn't do that. So it's by donation, and yeah, so that's
Wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah. It's so, I could talk to you for hours. It's so fascinating, your story. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for getting up really early where you are in Hawaii and just opening your heart and sharing your amazing story with us. It's amazing. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any message or
I don't know what that would be.
no?
I'm more curious, like I'm more curious to hear about your experiences, but I know that could be a different show, but maybe I'll start interviewing people. I don't know. I thought about that, but
Yeah. I,
it's
I
I'm sorry I don't know enough about you is what I'm saying, and having you interview me, I
okay.
really appreciate
Yeah.
that, but it's cool to talk about fairies, and they are real, and
Mm,
if you're watching this and you think we're crazy, that's fine too.
yeah.
Who cares?
I my one of my experiences was when I was in a liminal state, falling asleep. This is, experience that I might be able to compare with your experience of seeing fairies the way you did. And up until that point, I'd only experienced fairies because I'm an artist as well. That's the main thing I do, I've always done. So I'd see fairies in nature as part of nature because I do feel like you're saying they are part of the natural world. So I'd not seen any winged fairies. And then I was drifting off to sleep one night and I saw all of these they were like lit up, white, lit up fairies. I couldn't see any features and they had little wings and they were all just, just whizzing around above me. And that was amazing because I thought, oh, I've never seen a fairy with wings. And then that was my confirmation then. It's almost like they said, well, we're here. We do exist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. That's so cool.
Yeah. Um, and it was just moments. It wasn't like a long drawn out. I always find with these experiences, it's almost like it's just like a snapshot. It's not hours and hours. It's a few moments, a few
Yeah.
seconds at a time. Um, yeah, I've had other experiences as well with
Well,
pixies.
they've
Mm.
got things to do. They're not gonna hang out
No,
forever, right?
that's
They get
right.
they're busy.
They're busy. I wanted to gift you a fairy card. Pull a
Oh,
fairy from I've got a fairy oracle deck. It's called Fairy Magic Message Cards. Probably won't show up because I've got background, but I'll take a
can't
picture of it,
see it. Okay. Well,
send
thank
it to you.
you.
So let's have a look.
I was also gonna say with the
Mm,
your Patreon community, let me think of something. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head.
yeah, no, don't
But
worry.
let me think of something.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right, let's have a look. Oh, it's the pineal gland. I don't know if it'll uh can't show it to you. Oh, there we go.
Oh, I can kind of see it. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Little toadstool.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so fairies love the Amanita muscara toadstool. Its magical energy unlocks gates and magical doorways. Shamans use it when following the reindeer along ancient ley line tracks. just looking at this spotted beauty helps stimulate the third eye and pineal gland. It unlocks psychic powers and strengthens your intuition. Explore your mind, be open to ways of expanding it. And the affirmation is my intergalactic doorways are open and I expand my mind with loving protection.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, they are sweet cards. I'll send that to you. Send you a
Okay.
photo. Oh, great. So thank you ever so much for
Oh,
being
thank
my
you.
guest. And yeah, so this episode will come out tomorrow night.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm going to get it out.
Nice.
So yeah, I will send it to you. Send you the links. Have a wonderful day, Tyler, and
Uh,
keep in touch. And
Absolutely. Keep in touch.
keep in touch. Yeah. And how do you say goodbye in Hawaiian?
You can say aloha also, just
Aloha.
like yeah, aloha. Yeah.
Aloha, Tyler.
Aloha, Claire. Thank you so much. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, bye. I'll put
Uh,
your links in the notes for this show so people
okay,
can
sounds
find you.
great.
Bye for
Bye.
now. Thank you.